Chris and I will be presenting our paper on the university to work transitions of international students. Before we begin, we would like to note that the findings presented here emerged from a sub-grant led by Nancy Mandel and funded by an interdisciplinary SSHRC partnership grant, Building Migrant Resilience in Cities, or BMRC. Next, please. Thank you. We will present findings from interviews with 23 Chinese and South Asian international students in the Greater Toronto area who have decided to study and stay post-graduation. Using a university to work transition framework, we examine the challenges students face in their initial phases of adjustment, as well as those they consider most daunting now that they're in their final stage of transitioning out of school and into the labor force.
To begin by setting the context, the Canadian post-secondary sector has embarked on an internationalization project to increase the size of its student body since the 1950s. A recent Statistics Canada publication notes that between 2008 to 2018, the number of international student enrollments in Canada tripled from over 100,000 to over 300,000. International students from 225 countries now represent about 17% of all enrollment in Canadian post-secondary institutions. As for their post-graduation plans, international students are highly desirable and employable workers. They have Canadian educational credentials, Canadian work experience, fluency in English and French, Canadian social networks, and familiarity with Canadian sociocultural norms. Recent publications find that about 72% of international students plan to apply for a postgraduate work permit, and 60% of international students decide to apply for permanent residency through different programs. Post-graduation, most international students remain in their province of study. But what social, economic, and cultural factors shape their decision to study and stay? Additionally, what factors help or hinder the university to work transitions of international students? Our research has two main objectives. First, we examine the process that international students undergo as they transition from university to employment. Although international students face several challenges when transitioning out of school and into the workforce, we examine if these challenges are resolved or unresolved at the time of graduation. Our second research objective is to document some of the coping strategies that international students use to navigate their challenges as they transition from school to work. Based on the findings of our study, we suggest recommendations to help facilitate the transition from school to work.
We build on the framework developed by Nang and colleagues that conceptualizes a three-stage process of the university to work transition to capture the entirety of a student's process from when they are in their later years of their undergraduate degrees to when they secure employment. Stage 1, called prior to finishing the degree, captures the decision and actions taken by international students as they begin to contemplate remaining in Canada to work and obtain permanent residency following graduation. Stage 2, called looking for a job, includes all steps taken by students as they search to secure employment. And finally, Stage 3, finding and working in a job, refers to students' successful transition out of the university into employment. Next, please. This framework sees transition as a process beginning when students are still in university to when they secure their first employment post-graduation. Successful transition from school to work is often defined as a state in which individuals are employed after leaving university, perform at level satisfactory to their employers, and have positive attitudes towards their work and job requirements. But in each stage, students encounter specific challenges and deploy specific strategies for ensuring graduation and securing employment. At each stage of the transition, different supports are deemed significant for ensuring successful movement from one stage to the next.
In our larger project, we conducted a total of 73 in-depth interviews from May 2019 to May 2020 with South Asian and Chinese newcomers in Canada. We selected participants from 3 age groups to interview, including 19 seniors, 18 adults, and 36 youth. Focusing specifically on international students as they transition from university to work, we selected 23 participants based on their reported immigrant status as student visa holders on arrival in Canada. Applying a grounded theory analytic approach, each interview transcript was coded using MaxQDA, an online qualitative analysis software program. Here we present our major findings using the 3-stage transition model. In stage 1, the challenges and strategies of international students prior to finishing their degrees are examined. International students face several academic challenges. Participants felt overwhelmed and lost upon arrival. Despite receiving information packages both pre and post-arrival and accessing online information, students find navigating a new educational system challenging. They are unsure of who to approach with their questions. Language issues also complicate schooling. Many find that their level of speaking and writing English is inadequate and struggle to meet academic requirements and secure part-time employment. To cope with these challenges, students use institutional services, including orientation workshops, career centers, and language classes. Another challenge reported by students was a loss of social connections upon arrival in Canada. Students discussed working hard to develop peer relationships by participating in campus-based activities to build social connections. Sometimes interactions with peers who seem unwilling to engage in meaningful conversations can leave students feeling ignored and avoided. And students can struggle to form attachments to the university and to Canadian society. However, those who were able to develop meaningful relationships with peers or community and family members felt a greater sense of comfort and belonging. These students were provided with information about academics and employment opportunities, as well as social and emotional support. Reflecting on their university experiences, international students note the importance of building social connections to their post-secondary and employment experiences, as well as to their overall settlement experiences.
Another challenge they face is managing financial and employment challenges. Participants emphasize that not all international students are rich and have rich parents. While parents may pay for tuition and housing, students often pay for their own groceries and other essentials, all of which represent expenses most could barely afford without part-time jobs. This financial pressure leaves international students financially strapped and anxious. Students also make decisions about remaining in Canada and applying for work visas or returning to their home countries in this stage, which is a constant and reflective self-examination process. Our participants discussed the structural and individual factors affecting their decision to remain. Individual factors may include social connections and emotional support networks developed through friendships and communities, personal motivation to remain, and strategies employed to overcome these challenges. While structural factors mainly refers to the university supports that they would receive, such as academic advising, mentoring, job placement, and even including the help completing the work permits. Next, please. The second stage of the transition model represents a very stressful experience for international students. Some of the challenges they face include: first is the modification on the express entry profile that prioritizes candidates with Canadian job experience. This leaves international students feeling disadvantaged and disheartened regarding their chances of achieving permanent residency. Second, they also feel that their temporary status places them in a never-ending cycle of employment discrimination. No one hires them because they do not have permanent residency, but they cannot obtain permanent residency without the adequate job experience in this country. Third, International students faces discrimination during interviews, resulting into a negative experience of the job search. Fourth, many students brought up again the lack of Canadian work experience, which is deemed as an essential requirement for skilled workers for most employers. Yet again, students find it difficult to gain Canadian work experience since some of them have not been in Canada for very long and they lack the social capital connections needed to find jobs while in school. This lack Also, the lack of Canadian work experience is further exacerbated by the fact that overseas work experience is not recognized.
To cope with their challenges, international students reach out to friends, community members, family members, and acquaintances for information about employment opportunities and for direct job contacts. Those with insufficient connections tried enlarging their social networks through volunteering activities or by attending networking events at university or in their communities. Students discuss how social connections and networking are essential to finding full-time employment. When networking fails, international students may turn to other sources. For instance, one student contacted employment agencies for help. In stage 3, international students find jobs in Canada and are working after graduation. While most students were satisfied with their decision to remain in Canada, stage 3 of the transition process brought concerns about their migrant status, economic security, and employment precarity. For instance, students comment on expectations from employers who require them to have several years of Canadian work experience for entry-level positions. They find this to be an unrealistic expectation that prevents recent graduates from securing employment. Despite the difficulties they face, students work hard to find jobs. However, facing economic insecurity forces many to accept whatever full-time employment becomes available. Often, students did not work in the same fields in which they had completed their degrees, and students also discuss how the jobs they found after graduation were not their dream jobs. They would rather be working other jobs related to their fields of study or to their interests. Additionally, given the chance, some would choose to return to their countries of origin rather than remain working in Canada.
On one hand, due to the difficulty in finding employment in their field, some of our participants becomes self-employed rather than having a career in their preferred fields. Yet many remained hopeful that one day they would be able to pursue their chosen careers. On the other hand, those who have successfully found jobs felt more financially secure than they did while in school. Yet, many reported that their jobs did not allow them to save as much money, and they constantly faced this worry of possibly losing their jobs. While students were satisfied with their decision to remain in Canada, this stage of the transition further brought international students face to face with the economic insecurity, the high cost of living, employment precarity, and the temporariness of their migrant status. Existing literature suggests that despite the large number of international students attending post-secondary institution in the country, their status as temporary migrant results in an impermanent and liminal status within the immigration hierarchy. They receive limited and inadequate institutional support from post-secondary institution, and their temporary and precarious status exposes them to numerous vulnerabilities and struggle in this country. They are denied access to health and formal settlement services normally available to permanent residents. International students also experience exclusion and discrimination both in the classroom and from the larger society, and they end up feeling less deserving of the same rights and entitlements as those received by immigrants with permanent residence. This results in psychological, physical, and social distress. Despite individual reports acknowledging these vulnerabilities, there is no national or coordinated strategies attempting to ameliorate these vulnerabilities through a more holistic understanding of the needs and experiences of international students. These findings lead us to conclude that inadequate institutional support by formal immigration services and post-secondary institution means that some early settlement issues confronting international students remains unresolved at the time of their graduation, and thus it complicates their transition out of post-secondary schools into the labor force.
Our research confirms that the settlement and integration of international students should be understood as a long process with distinct stages. From pre-arrival to employment, international students need more university support, such as settlement, career, and immigration services. Since the current study mainly focused on the first and second stages of university to work transitions, future research should examine stage 3 in more detail to understand the degree to which international students find permanent employment corresponding with their educational training and credentials. It will also be interesting to learn how postgraduate employment opportunities may differ by occupational sector. By investigating stage 3 further, more can be learned about the policy changes, employer practices, and communal support that can be implemented to address de-skilling challenges faced by international students in the workplace. This ends our presentation, and we thank you for this opportunity to present our research.
Again, thank you so much for keeping to time. You've given us a really rich set of things to think about.